Good morning, colleagues. This is Mr. Kosana. We are live on YouTube presenting the QMS training to all our post-level 1 educators. Give us at least 10 minutes. I can see people are still logging in. We don't have sufficient numbers yet, but I can see the numbers are increasing. In 10 minutes time, we'll then be starting. Please log in, everyone. You can see the numbers are going up. Thank you very much. Good morning once more. Good day, colleagues. This is Mr. Sikosana. We are now starting with our QMS Post-Level 1 training for all Durban Northwest educators. This is the first session. We'll have a second session starting at 1 o'clock. This training is for educators at Ntuzuma as well as Kranskloof Circuit as arranged. Colleagues, I hope you have all been able to log in. I can see people already. That's why we are starting now with our training. Now, our training will be the following topics. The second one is the program, and these are the topics that will be covered. Opening and welcome, purpose of the training, background and introduction, definition, purpose and guiding principles of QMS, roles and responsibilities of individuals and structures, performance standard, criteria and descriptors, the implementation process, appraisal instrument for post-level 1. We are dealing with the post-level 1s today, the relationship between appraisal and development, disagreement and grievances, QMS flowchart, difference between QMS and IQMS, QMS management plan, and lastly, questions and comments. That is what will be covered in our first session, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we welcome you all and thank you very much for taking your time and be participant in this very critical and important training of us as post-level 1 educators, CMC. Now, the purpose of this workshop, ladies and gentlemen, is to orientate all school-based educators to implement the QMS quality management system as informed by the ELRC Collective Agreement number 2 of 2020. Let's quickly go and look at the background and the introduction. Now, the IQMS that has been implemented since 2005, which was then been in place from 2003 but was only implemented in 2005, is coming to an end. Despite all the measures put in place to strengthen its implementation, that is the IQMS, schools have continued to experience challenges with IQMS. As the Department of Education, we then conducted a formal review of structures and processes that were causing problems and hindrances towards the successful of the implementation of the IQMS. Now, a sequel of research conducted and persistent effort by teacher unions on strengthening the teacher development. Teacher Development Summit was then held on the 29th of June, which lasted until the 2nd of July in 2009. And these were some of the agreements that were reached in that summit. Number one, that a clear, coherent policy and regulatory environment be designed for teacher appraisal and teacher development. Number two, that the teacher appraisal for development be delinked from appraisal and for the purposes of remuneration and salary progression, as well as that the IQMS be streamlined and rebranded. Now, colleagues, the QMS is based and it's a result of collective agreement. Initially, there was a collective agreement in 2014 titled Collective Agreement number 2 of 2014, which was aimed at introducing quality management system QMS for school-based educators. And this collective agreement was finalized in September 2019. But as you all know, colleagues, that due to COVID-19 pandemic, which hit us unexpectedly last year, the national lockdown declared by the President in March 2020, training on IQMS was then suspended. Subsequently, parties in the LRC agreed on few amendments to be effected on the agreement. Therefore, as a result, the collective agreement number 2 of 2014 was then repealed, and the new collective agreement number 2 of 2019 was then adopted on the 17th of September last year, 2020. And these are the few key amendments that were effected from the collective agreement number 2 of 2014 and came into effect in the collective agreement number 2 of 2020. The most remarkable one is the performance in the performance standard number 4 for post-level 1 and post-level 2 educators. Going to performance standard number 4, which deals with professional development. There is a the second criterion, the educator professionalism. That was the first amendment that was effected, as well as the amendment on lesson observation. There was an inclusion on lesson observation instrument for post-level 3 and post-level 4 educators. And you look, that is obtainable on Annexure E3. For the amendments that have to do with post-level 1s, those are just the few amendments that were implemented. Now, let's go and look at the capacity building and implementation of QMS. Now, as I indicated earlier on, that because of COVID-19, a phased-in approach was adopted, and the implementation of principals being subjected to evaluation takes place from January 2021. The principals are already in the system and they are being evaluated mid-year. Has been completed. We're now going for annual assessment. And for all other school-based educators, it will be effected as the 1st of January 2022. So, ladies and gentlemen, please expect that from January 2022, all school-based educators, with the exception of principals who were part of it this year, will be joining in this QMS. As well as the training capacity building on QMS by national and provincial training team. As we are seated here, we are provincial training team. This is how it happened. Principal training started in October up to December 2020, and school-based from January till December 2021. As we are busy with the training, as we are today training all of you post-level 1 in the Durban North CMC. Colleagues, I just want to stop there now and introduce our next presenter, who will be taking us on definition, purpose, as well as the guiding principles of QMS. But before I sit down, I want to introduce the members of the team. The presenter that will be taking over now is Mr. Praveen from our teacher development in Pinetown District. We also have amongst us Mr. Mngoma, who is the circuit manager for the Westville circuit, as well as Ms. Msomi, who is the circuit manager at Kranskloof circuit. We're also amongst us, joined by our social partners. We have Mr. Msomi, who is representing South African Democratic Teachers Union, who also forms part of the training team. Let's then welcome Mr. Praveen, who will be taking us on the next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skosana. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. I'm going to be talking to you about the definition and purposes of this document, and I'd probably like to start by saying a few things about the origin of this document. I think it's worth spending a few moments on it. It's derived from the Integrated Strategic Planning Framework for Teacher Education and Development, which commenced somewhere around 2009, but it's intended to last from 2011 to 2025. Mr. Skosana has spoken to you about the various amendments that the document has undergone. We need to concern ourselves with, as level 1 educators, on two principal aspects. The one refers to the quality management system, which is the subject of today's workshop, and the other concerns itself with CPTD, Continuing Professional Teacher Development. Now, the Department of Education, your employer, is responsible for the quality management system process, for which it has developed documentation, for which it is holding workshops, and for which it has set into motion a series of evaluation processes. As the program progresses, and you need to concentrate specifically on those aspects that will enable you to complete this document to the best of your ability, i.e. the way in which it captures your achievements as well as your shortcomings, so that the necessary steps can be taken to improve your capacity to become a better educator. With those few comments on the first slide, I'd like to say, secondly, that it is important for you to first and foremost begin your job description. Now, your job description is contained in a document called Personnel Administration Measures 2016, in which all of your role functions as an educator are very clearly enunciated. Now, why is it important for you to be familiar with this? It's important for you to be familiar with this so that when you're evaluated, you understand that these are the areas along which I'm expected to perform. Now, you're not left in the dark. One of the better places in which you can begin by familiarizing yourself with this is by starting with a very comprehensive document called the School Self-Evaluation. It's called the SSE. This document is a very, very comprehensive document that sets out various criteria and descriptors, very detailed descriptors of all areas of performance of a teacher in a school setting. So I would advise that you start there, that you start by familiarizing yourself with the description, the SSE, and then to develop a work plan that would enable you to dovetail eventually into the quality management system document. It's very important also to understand that the quality management system does not exist in isolation. The quality management system is intended to feed into various other processes that exist in your school. And I want to refer to two very important ones in that regard. That would be the school improvement plan, which you devise in conjunction with your departmental heads and your SMTs. And the other one is the school development plan. The first is the school improvement plan, and the second is the school development plan, which has a shelf life of 3 years and which is presided over by the school government. So, the purpose of IQMS, as indicated on the slide, is to establish what the levels of competence of educators on this staff are. Importantly, to enhance the efficiency of teachers. It also talks to the matter of underperformance, and I think it is important for people to make note of those areas where you lack capacity, because if you note these accurately and honestly, you could get the support that you need in order to improve your practice. The point about salary progression has been spoken to already by Mr. Skosana. It has been linked from this process currently, but it will be introduced in years to come down the line. So, in this particular slide here, I think it's very important to understand that the entire process is conducted in a very clinical and objective way. It is designed not to allow for individual prejudices to set into the system, and for this reason, it's important for you to understand that you're going to be quantified on your performance and not on any aspect of your personality. and that this would be done scrupulously in terms of the evidence that you provide and produce, and that the discussions between yourself and the departmental head would take place in a very objective way. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Mr. Ngoma, who will talk to you on the roles and responsibilities of individuals and structures. Thank you.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Rem, for giving me a chance to proceed with the presentation. As it has been said, ladies and gentlemen, I just apologize for this delay. It was a technical problem that needed attention, but thanks very much that it is okay now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm taking you through the roles and responsibilities of individuals and structures in the whole process. You would recall that whilst we were doing IQMS, there were role players who were involved in ensuring that IQMS processes are in place and they are done successfully. The same applies here. We've got role players who are going to take you through to see which are those and what is that they're actually doing. Now, we have the principal, we also have the SMT, the educator, who is an appraisee in this case, the resource person. You recall that the resource person was involved in IQMS. Again, here now, the resource person is optional. It's not mandatory that the resource person should always be there. And then we have the circuit manager and also the grievance committee. I'm now going to look at the individual role player and also the responsibilities assigned to them. Now, the principal in this case has to ensure that every educator has access to the QMS instrument and relevant documents. So you are aware that, of course, the principal is the head, has to prepare and ensure that everything and all the documents that are necessary are available and accessible for each and every educator to use. And then also the principal ensures that the QMS is implemented uniformly and effectively. Then we come down to the school management team, the SMT. The SMT conducts performance appraisals of educators, including classroom or lesson observation, and keeps records thereof. Again, here, when we're doing IQMS, then the SMT had a role, the same applies here in this case. Then the educator who's in this case is an appraisee, the educator, would have to conduct a self-appraisal prior to being appraised by the immediate supervisor. Obviously, the immediate supervisor in this case for a level 1 educator is a departmental head. Also, the educator or the appraisee should inform the supervisor during the pre-appraisal meeting or at least 3 days prior to the scheduled appraisal date on the intention to involve a resource person. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the resource person in this case, if at all an educator feels they need a resource person, then they will make arrangements for that, and also prior would have to inform your supervisor that you need a resource person. Obviously, if you do not need a resource person, you don't have to have them, and obviously you will have to. And then the appraisee again allows the immediate supervisor to conduct lesson observations and keeps relevant evidence for the appraisal process. You would recall, ladies and gentlemen, when we go through the performance standards, that classroom observations will be focusing on performance standard number 1, performance standard number 2, and performance standard number 3, not the other performance standard. We want to focus only on what is actually happening or taking place in the classroom during teaching and learning. Then we have the resource person, ladies and gentlemen. What is the resource person's role, if at all an appraisee has opted to have one? An educator who may be requested by the appraisee to assist in the appraisal process through provision of subject or other relevant expertise. So this is the main role of a resource person, if at all they are involved, that they would have to provide the relevant expertise that they've been identified for. Then number 5, the circuit manager. The circuit manager in this particular case, ladies and gentlemen, would realize that would feature more often in the event the principal is an appraisee. So, but let us just go through it because it appears here. The circuit manager agrees on a work plan with the principal with clear annual targets and performance indicators. As I indicated, that this applies to principals of schools as supervised or appraised by their circuit managers. And then they also, circuit manager, manage the performance of principals in a consultative, supportive, and non-discriminatory manner to enhance school efficiency and accountability. This may not necessarily apply to you at this stage, but surely, because one day you will be principals of schools, and as long as QMS is in force and in place, you will be subjected to this as well. Then we have got a grievance committee. You'll recall again in IQMS we had such a structure. This structure again is also available or made to participate in this QMS system. At the school level, we have got a grievance committee that resolve any grievance or disagreements at school level. This may actually be the case in the event there is a disagreement with regards to the scores that a supervisor has awarded to a supervisee. Then if that is not between the two, the supervisor and the supervisee, then that can actually be referred to a grievance committee at a school level for their intervention. And then also, if at all that is not resolved at a school level, a collective agreement allows for a school-based grievance committee to refer a grievance or to what you call to the second grievance committee, which will actually do the same, and hope that the second grievance committee will be able to resolve a disagreement and get all or everything in order. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us therefore move now to the so-called performance standards, criteria, and the descriptors. I always refer you back to IQMS, ladies and gentlemen, because I remember when you are teaching, you would always start from the note. You'll agree with me because you are educators or teachers yourselves. Now, performance standards were there in IQMS, criteria and descriptors, but there is a bit of a difference now. You realize along the way when the presenters come on stage that what the differences will be. Now, the performance standards, it's actually based on your job description. It is encapsulated in the PAMP document. I strongly believe that each and every educator are aware of the job description. You must have a job description. It makes your life easy to say, have I covered all what I'm expected to cover as an educator? Because your job description tells you exactly what is that you are supposed to do and how far you can actually go as an educator. Now, the performance standard form the core elements of the job description for educators. You know that there's a job description for your level as PL1 and for departmental head, deputy principal and all the other levels, even outside school level. Every employee of the department would have their job description. Then the criteria form the key deliverables for each performance standard. The same applies with IQMS. Here comes again the issue of criteria addressing what the performance standard says. And then we have got the descriptors that aid in defining and outlining the expected conduct for a particular criterion. When we go back to the issue of criteria, or let's even go back to performance standards, you realize that the number of performance standards for a PL1 educator in this case would be 5. For a departmental head would be 6. For a deputy principal, the PS would be 7, and also for a principal. And also, for each standard, there are criteria that are allocated. We are going to go through that. And also the descriptors. And the criteria would not always be equal under each performance standard. Each performance standard has a specified number of criteria and a specified number of descriptors. But we'll go there right now. Now, here is an outline of the performance standards for a PL1 educator. I did earlier indicate that for a PL1 educator, the performance standards are 5. The first one is creation of a positive learning and teaching environment. Positive teaching, learning and teaching environment. This is very crucial, educators, because it makes your life easy, having organized the class setup, ensuring that what you are about to do and what the learners are going to be engaged in is going to be successful and made more easy and effective, of course. Number 2, curriculum knowledge, lesson planning, and presentation. Oh my goodness, this one is very, very important. Knowledge of the curriculum that you are going to deliver to the learners or to your class. Having prepared your lessons and also applying or employing the correct and relevant presentation skills. Then number 3, learner assessment and achievement. We all know that we cannot only teach and not assess. Checking the progress of understanding whether learners have understood or your teaching and learning has been successful or not. Then number 4, professional development. That is outside the classroom. Yes, could be inside and also outside the classroom. But the first 3 focus mainly on the classroom, as it were. Then number 5, extramural and co-curricular participation. This one, of course, is outside the class. I do want to indicate to you, ladies and gentlemen, that when we speak of classroom observation that your supervisor is going to do, we'll only be looking at criterion number 1, criterion number 2, and criterion number 3. So those are the key aspects or performance standards that your supervisor will look at when they are doing classroom evaluation, because it is part and parcel of QMS evaluation. Now, let us now unpack the number of criteria and the number of descriptor under each performance standard. I indicated earlier on that for a PL1 educator, there are 5 performance standards. Creation of a positive learning and teaching environment. And there are 2 criteria addressing that. And there are 7 descriptors. You will see them when you are actually undergoing QMS evaluation at a school. And then number 2, curriculum knowledge, lesson planning, and presentation. Again, here we have got 4 criteria allocated to it. We have 12 descriptors. Number 3, learner assessment and achievement. 3 criteria and 7 descriptors. May I emphasize again that your supervisor will visit you in class and observe. His or her observation will actually be based on the first 3 criteria. The 4th one, which is professional development, carries or goes along with 2 criteria and 9 descriptors. Extramural and co-curricular participation is only 1 and 3 descriptors. The total number of criteria for all 5 performance standards, it's 12. It's 12. That's what will be evaluated on. And then the descriptors end up to 30 all. And the total for a PL1 evaluation, total score, or the maximum, sorry, not a total score, but the maximum score is 152. Now, here we speak of a departmental head. I'll just run through this one because it doesn't necessarily pertain you, but of course, one day you will be a departmental head. PS number one, when you say performance standard, I mean PS will be referring to performance standard. Now, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 for a P1 are exactly the same as for a head. So they are the same. But now the difference is for a departmental head, because a departmental head is your supervisor or is a curriculum manager. There is an additional one which is the management of curriculum. You are managing curriculum delivery or supervising curriculum delivery. So there's the fifth, what you call the sixth one now. We have, again, here we won't pay much attention because it's for departmental aid. Yeah, but the maximum score is 228 for departmental aid. For deputy principal, I did indicate earlier on that performance that there's a difference now here. It's more of leading the learning school, shaping the direction and development of the school, managing quality, and so on, and they add up to 7. But this one addresses the department and the deputy principals. And then, again, this is an analysis of how they are allocated, the performance standards, the criteria for each performance standard, and also the number of the scriptures under each performance standard and criteria. For the principalship, deputy principal is 286, which actually is the maximum score. The principal is pretty much the same as the deputy principal, and then this is as I've indicated earlier on, the maximum score here for the principal is 284, but number of performance standards are equal, the same as with the deputy principal. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We've come to the end of my part. I will therefore now hand over the next slide, which speaks of the implementation process that is going to be dealt with or covered by Ms. Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Good day, colleagues. We understand that due to announced load shedding hours, some of you might not be able to log in. Should you be under those conditions, no worries, because you'll be able to catch up with it as it will be live. Also, you will also get the second link for the next session. Colleagues, we are on the implementation process. Theory part has been done, and now let us look as to how do we put this into practice. The slide that we are at right now has, and these pictures are literally taking you step by step until you feel your own instrument or a tool. On the first picture, it's a true reflection of yourself, which means you have your own session with yourself. It's a reflection. On the second one, you sit with your mentor. As post-level ones, obviously your mentor or your immediate supervisor will be your departmental head. You discuss everything that you feel needs to be discussed with your mentor prior to presentation, a lesson, and your mentor will be invited to just observe your lesson. After the observation, that will be the post appraisal, whereby you will sit again with your mentor and discuss about what has transpired from the classroom observation, and also be able to discuss some, remember Mr. Ngoma was talking about some of these performance standards are classroom based, outside the classroom. Those are your extramural as well as your co-curricular activities. Then lastly, it's the tool itself, whereby you will have to score and go through it religiously. So we are moving to the next slide. We are looking at mid-year and annual appraisal. These are the appraisals that are said to be formal. When we say formal, it means they has to be done honestly and earnestly so, and you have to go through all the steps that were presented in those pictures which were forming part of our slide 2, whereby you have to have a moment with yourself, rate yourself, sit with your mentor, speak of everything, go to classroom, and so on and so forth. So the mid-year one, as it takes place at the end of the second semester, that will be your second quarter, as the year possesses 4 quarters. And then on the annual appraisal, this one takes place at the end of the school calendar year, taking into account all forms of assessment prior your appraisal. Then we move to the next slide, which is informal appraisals. It is called informal because there is nothing compelling as to you to writing any documents as to the first quarter as well as the third quarter. What is the reason for this informal appraisal? A certain compliance with performance standards merely for support, as it is merely for purposes of developmental by your departmental head. So there are no records that are kept. You may be asking yourself as to, do you really have to do it? Of course you have to. That there is nothing requested of you or no formal document does not mean you have to start analyzing yourself or identifying your strengths and your weaknesses just because a mentor is coming to do it formally. You have to know where you are coming from, so you know where you are going to. Then the next slide. The next slide is now breaking down all the appraisals steps, starting from the self. On the first one, we move from A up to E. There are 5 in all. The self is the one that is done prior. The second one, pre-appraisal discussion, it's before the lesson, where you state your contextual factors that might cause a hindrance when you are presenting your lesson in class. And you move to the third one, which is lesson observation. Your mentor will come to class, observe your lesson, and score you. Obviously, when you are there on the lesson observation, the document specifies or explains as to saying that there can be more than one class visit or lesson observation should there be a need. Then you move to the next one, post-appraisals discussion. That is where your scores are given by the supervisor, rating you based on all the steps that have been done, including the classroom. Then you discuss amongst yourself and agree on the scoring. And then the last one, which is the IQMS instrument. That is where both the supervisor as well as you, the appraisee, you sign, and also you take this to the principal for verification. We move to the next slide. You are now at the self-appraisal by the educator as to what does it entail. That is where you fill in Annexure 1, whereby you fill your information as well as the school. You rate yourself, looking at the strengths, the areas of development, and then you submit your appraisal instrument to your immediate supervisor. And then there are pages below, 28 to 32, for more information should you need information based on what really happens on self-appraisal. Then we move to the next slide. Pre-appraisal discussion. Pre means before. That is initiated by your immediate supervisor as to what to talk about in this meeting of yours. You talk about your common understanding of performance and standards as well as rating, so that when the rating part is implemented, there are no glitches. You are all on the same page. It also gives you an opportunity as a teacher who will be conducting the lesson into presenting that might be contextual towards your lesson presentation. In other words, those are things that might be a hindrance to you to present a lesson in a manner that you would love to present. Also, your immediate supervisor will give you the expectations as to what is it that is expected from the lesson, and also there will be submission of source of evidence. So logistics in terms of what subject is to be presented, the dates, and all and the time is also finalized. You can also go to your page 13 of the document, whereby you will get enough information. Remember, Mr. Mngoma has referred to the roles that the principal has to do, of which one of it was to ensure that all educators are in possession of this document. Then we move to the next slide. Lesson observation. Now, this is the core of the process, whereby the visit is done, the mentor is in the classroom, the teacher is presenting, and that is where the pedagogical skills, which are your instructional duties in terms of lesson presentation, are being analyzed, and it says more lessons observation are encouraged depending on the need. Remember, we are here for development purposes. A visit might be done once, but it may seem not enough, and therefore, if there is a need of initiating a second one, it shall be so. That is where your supervisor will also fill in Annexure E2, of which, if you want to see how does that page 89 in your document. This document has to be signed by both parties, that is you as your immediate supervisor. Then we move to the next slide on post-appraisal. Post meaning after all the steps have been done. You have done your one-on-one, you've done the pre, you've done the class visits. Now it's after everything has been done. This is where you will be rated and get your scores, taking into consideration the appraisal that you have done prior by yourself. Then that is where the educator and will also record his or her comments. Remember that we have said this time around there has to be a resource person should there be a need. It's not a must thing, but it can happen if there is a need. So if there are any glitches in terms of scoring, whereby there are discrepancies, that is where you are to mitigate and find each other on this on this post-appraisal discussion. And remember, this discussion is merely for the developmental process. Remember that there is the integrated strategic planning framework for teacher education and development, which is established merely for ensuring that developmental purposes are fulfilled in terms of learning and teaching. And that is where the issue of subject committees as well as PLCs, professional learning committees, whereby you meet each other and discuss issues of learning for capacitation purposes. That is what has to be done, because for IQMS, remember we said it has been streamlined so that we ensure that the core, which is learning and teaching, is done to its best. We're moving to the last one, which is the E part, the completion of QMS instrument. This is where the supervisor will be clearly and accurately record all the scores accordingly to the instrument, and then the principal will sign, and as well as the educator, and where the educator and the immediate supervisor, and also have to look at any discrepancies. If there are any, then they will be dealt with. And you can also go to your page 12 to page 14. Initially, we should be now going to the next slide, which is about appraisal instrument. But allow me, colleagues, to move on from there, as that part will be covered by the next presenter. But for now, let us move to this slide, which is relationship between appraisal and development. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that with IQMS, we've been raised and we are receiving remunerations as well as incentives, whatever you want to call it. But when it was streamlined, it is because it was seen that it wasn't fulfilling the core or the cause of which it was designed for. Hence, we are going to see in the next slide when I explain. But firstly, let us look at this slide, which is on schematic representation of relationship between appraisal and development. This is nothing but merely what has been previously explained, because it speaks to the informal as well as the formal part of appraisal, which is the first quarter and the third quarter, which are referred to be as informal. And then we have the second quarter and the fourth quarter, which are said to be formal, whereby all documents and steps are fulfilled. But all of them, they are all there merely for one cause, and that cause is developmental. Hence, the development part is at the center of it. And it also speaks to the integrated part of things, whereby we have said it is there to develop, so that if I find it hard for myself to teach liaise with the school next door for merely improvement, and also we can even liaise with the schools around your area in order to uplift yourselves. Then we move to the next slide, the needs identification. You may be asking yourself, why QMS? It has been previously explained, but again, this slide is emphasizing QMS. QMS is for developmental purposes, so no one should find himself or herself being scared of it, because you are not here to be judged, but to be developed. Hence, we have spoken of the PLCs, we have spoken of the and also we need to note this one, colleagues, because it aims at delinking incentives, remuneration from evaluations for the purposes of professional development. So QMS has been identified as the tool which will be dealing with this with this business of delinking remunerations for development. As we all know, previously we will be doing IQMS and then we'll be asking ourselves, when is our percent coming in? Then it shifted the goalpost. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of it, and kindly welcome Mr. Msomi for the next presentation.
Good day, colleagues, and thank you, Ms. Msomi, for that wonderful session. I am going to, firstly, before going to grievances, I want to tackle the part of appraisal instruments for post level 1. We will also in the next session, session 2, touch on instrumentals that are used in QMS, but specifically for post level 1, we want to go through this instrumental. It's important as we are going to participate in QMS for level 1 in the following year, that we understand and it is clear what is expected of us. I am going to try and show the instrument for you, so you're just going to wait a bit for me while I am trying to locate it. Right, got it. Thank you for your patience. I just want to speak to the appraisal instrument for post level 1. Colleagues, I want to also remind you that with IQMS, there was one instrument that was used. So there was a sort of a blanket approach. Post level 1, post level 2, post level 3, up to post level 4. We were all using the same instrument. Now with QMS, we are using a instrument that is speaking to each post level. So in this particular case, I'm going to be speaking to this instrument that is solely speaking only to you, right? All the performance standards will be showing, which is performance standards from number 1 to performance standard number 2. Remember that Mr. Mngoma was really speaking on to performance standard, and he did mention that there are performance standards for post level 1. So in this particular case, you have your performance standard, your criterion, as well as your desirable outcome, right? I want us to go through this instrument. Your first page, you are going to have your educator information as well as your school information, right? I think we are familiar with filling in forms. You need to state your highest qualification, your Appraisal number, and everything like that. Then you go to 2. You need to fill in the details of the appraiser, similar with IQMS, right? Designation with the Appraisal number. With IQMS, this was not really necessarily. With QMS, it has to be there. Then you go to number 3. You need to fill in the school information, the province that you are from, as well as the principal's name, their contact number, contact details. It is needed in this appraisal instrument. Then number 4, you need to fill in your brief job description. Now, colleagues before me, the job description that is on your contract. We all signed our contract, which is PEM, a document. So this will really assist you if you are not aware what are your job description. Refer to your PEM document. So your teaching and assessment responsibilities, you need to fill them in here, as well as your extramural activities. We know as post level 1, we have quite a lot of extramural activities that we participate in our schools. And then you need to fill in any administrative duties that you are involved in school. For example, if you are assisting in ASA SAMs, that is part of your administrative duties, and if there are any other, you just fill them in that section. Right, let's move on to the part now, which is section B. This is where all your performance standards appear, and instrument is very user friendly. Remember that my previous speaker, Ms. Msomi, did allude to the fact that for there are 2 appraisal sessions. You have a media appraisal as well as your annual appraisal, and we are going to do an experiment how user friendly this document is. For example, standard number 1, creation of a positive learning and teaching environment, and then you have your criterion 1, which is to learning and teaching environment. Your supervisor will visit you on your lesson observation during the media as well as the annual appraisal with this instrument. Remember that you will also be doing a appraisal prior your lesson observation by your supervisor. Now, Under performance standard number 1, creation of a positive learning and teaching environment, you've got a learning and a teaching environment. Your supervisor then will be looking at teaching arrangement promotes effective teaching and learning. You will be scored upon these criteria. So when you are going to your classroom, is your seating arrangement good for the content that you are about to deliver to the learners? Is the classroom tidy? Is it clean? And then we look at C, teaching and learning supporting material are displayed and used in a classroom. So during the media, in the media column, your supervisor will therefore be filling in a score, a value between 1 to 4. And then on an annual column as well, will be scoring you a score rating from 1 up to 4. Right, I want us to do a tester. Right, let me see if I'll be able to edit, and then let me see there. Right, yes, now I should be able to edit. Let me see. For example, during the lesson observation in media, let's just say it was acceptable, which is 2, right? In media, all right, it was good, which is 3. How user-friendly this document is, I would suggest that all schools or your principal should have this, in fact, an electronic copy rather than a hard copy, right? So remember that I have no evidence for this. I'm just trying to show you how easy this instrument is to use, right? Now, let's say now your supervisor has visited you and appraised upon the visit for performance standard number 1, criteria number 1. Let's also try and fill in criteria number 2. You're being appraised or you're given a score, and the instrument automatically adds up, calculates, and gives you a score. After filling in this instrument, remember that you are going to fill in a composite score sheet that you will, as Ms. Nsomi mentioned earlier on, needs to be signed by you upon agreement of all scores. If there were a resource person, remember resource person also needs to sign in the instrument, right? And then will be sent to the principal for verification. Now we have filled in this document. As you can see, there is a subtotal for criteria number 1, and then this is a subtotal for criteria number 2. Then you get an overall total for performance standard number 1. Now, below here there is a section for comments that needs to be filled in. Remember that you cannot leave this blank. The comments needs to be filled in by your supervisor as well as your resource person if you requested one. Right, now let us look at this composite sheet. When you are done with your appraisal, then a composite score sheet needs to be filled in. You need to have a maximum score of 28 for criterion number 1 under performance standard number 1, and then it automatically calculate and give you a score in a composite score sheet. Then in the bottom here is our 16 appraisal instrument, which is taken now into the composite score sheet. Remember, Mr. Mngoma did mention that you need to have a maximum score of 100. Also make you aware, colleagues, for us to get our pay progression in this particular year, it is 1,5. You need to get a 50% score for us to get a pay progression of 1,5. Now, soon as you complete the instrument, appraisal instrument, all your scores will automatically be filled in here. So you do not need to do a whole lot of administration and calculators and calculation. This document has already been set up for you. That is why I was recommending that your principal should have this document. Obviously, if you do not have, it does not stop the appraisal to be conducted. Right, as I was saying earlier on, right at the bottom, there are sections for comments. Let us make sure that this is filled in, and then bottom, resource person and everybody needs to comment. Your principal needs to comment. If you had a resource person requested, remember it is optional. Then upon your pre-discussion for your scores. I mean your post-discussion, and then you sign as your supervisor need to sign, resource person need to sign, and then your principal need to sign after validation is done. Then there need to be a school stamp. All this, when it is completed, then the principal needs to send it to the district. Right, colleagues, that is as far as the appraisal instrument for post level 1. We will speak to an appraisal document for post level 2, level 3 and level 4, so that you get to know that what is happening and what they are doing. So I will move now from the appraisal instrument and probably move on to the next slide, which is speaking to the grievances and disagreements. Right. Yeah, perhaps colleagues, before I move on to the agreements, let me speak to ratings and scores. Remember when I showed you the instrument, we spoke of about a rating 1 to 4 that will be used or will be allocated to each descriptor in the appraisal instrument. A score will be allocated for each standard and will consist of the sum of the ratings allocated to each criterion in the performance standard. Now, in allocating a rating for a descriptor, where contextual factors have been identified, consideration must be given to the following: the contextual factor, the level of its impact on the educator's performance, and the extent to which the educator is or was able to mitigate such effect. Right. I also want to speak to these contextual factors. The reason for a pre-discussion during the appraisal or before the appraisal is so that educators, between the appraisee and the supervisor, we need to talk, we need to discuss, we need to make the supervisor aware of any contextual factors prior the lesson observation. Right, colleagues, we know that in our schools we do have contextual factors, and we need to also be mindful that school A may have a contextual factor with school B. Right, so we need to talk about this. Supervisor needs to come to class for a lesson observation having had an idea what to expect during the lesson observation. So educators, and especially those who will be appraised. In fact, all educators will be appraised from level 1 up until level 4. So we need to talk about our contextual factors. There will be contextual factors. So let us not now, during the discussion of scores, in post discussion, and talk about contextual factors, this is what I encountered and so forth, right? And let us talk about it before the lesson observation. Now, the supervisor need to put into consideration contextual factor, not that every raised contextual factor amounts to be considered. Some may be raised by the appraisal, only to find that it may not be a valid or does not weigh to be a contextual factor. So we need to discuss this prior to lesson observation, right? Also consider the level of its impact on the educator, right? I may make an example that perhaps for the lesson that or the content that we want to deliver as a educator, it requires us to have a number of textbooks, right? We know that number of schools perhaps may have a minimal number of textbook for the particular lesson or for the particular that needs to be taught, right? Then the next bullet speaks to how did the educator then mitigate, right? For example, the educator may have gotten extra resources. You may have used a PowerPoint instead of textbook. You may have used the YouTube videos instead of a textbook. So we identified a contextual factor, right? However, now during the lesson observation, the educator was able to mitigate, right? So now when the supervisor and the resource person are scoring, they need to consider that you mitigated upon identifying a contextual factor. So colleagues, I think this is very important, because at certain point or a certain level, we may find unhappiness during this scoring discussion or post discussion that the contextual factors that were raised and they were not considered. So therefore, we need to also understand which type or what kind of contextual factors will be considered, and how did we mitigate or how did we go across the challenge. So right, colleagues, then we are going to look at all familiar with the rating scale, a scale from the rating scale, which is 1 to 4, obviously, 1 being unacceptable. The level of performance does not meet the minimum expectation and requires urgent intervention and support. And obviously, that gives us 0 to 49%. And then rating 2 is acceptable, satisfies the minimum expectation. Level of performance is acceptable and is in line with the minimum expectation, but development and support are still required. So there's room for development there, and that is 50% to 69%, right? And rating A, it says it's good. Performance meet expectation, right? But some areas are still in need of development and support, right? That is 70% to 84%. Then rating number 4, outstanding, exceptionally well. Performance exceeds expectation. Although performance is outstanding, right? Continuous self-development and improvement are advisable, right? Right, colleagues. Now, I also want to speak to this one. It does not mean I may not get a rating of 4, because that can only mean I've only reached an 85%. It does not necessarily mean 100%. It mainly means I got 85%, and it says the continuous development and improvement are advised. So I may need also a development as well. Right, moving on to my next slide, which speaks to completion of instrument. Ms. also mentioned this in her presentation, right? The supervisor must forward the completed instrument to the principal's office at the scheduled time. Then the principal will sign and complete instrument after both educator and the supervisor have signed, and after satisfying him or herself that all processes have been complied with. If you are happy, everything went according to plan, then we sign all documents and send to the principal. Now, should the principal be aware of any discrepancies, this should be attention of the relevant supervisor as well as the resource person if one was requested or one was required, who will be required to correct it. Now, the principal reserves the right to designate any member of the SMT who is conversant with the subject or the phase to conduct an appraisal process should it be evident that the relevant supervisor is unable to do so. Right? Remember, colleagues, now QMS, the people that is responsible, the person that is responsible for QMS now is the principal. Remember, we used to have DSGs and we used to have SDT that were really in charge of QMS. Now it's solely in responsibility of the SMT. Obviously, we all will be playing a role during the implementation of the QMS. We are all in charge. However, the principal is the one that is really responsible for IQMS. Right? We want to move over now to disagreements and grievances. I know Mr. Ngoma on this when he was taking us through the roles and the responsibilities. Now we want to go deeper in what do I do as an appraisee if I am not happy with a particular process that unfolded during the QMS. Who do I need to contact, or what is the process? We know there are grievance committees, and now what steps do I need to follow and what needs to take place for me at the end of the day to be satisfied or to be happy during QMS. Now, colleagues, we know we are bound to not see eye to eye to a certain extent, to a certain level. We do not need to have grievance committees and all of those kind of committees, because I mean we are all working. We're trying by all means to be satisfied with our work. However, we are human. We are bound to make mistakes, or we want also to not be happy with certain things, how they are done and so forth. Right? So there will be a grievance committee. Right? We urge colleagues, let's try and not come to the point where we have a grievance committee. If there are any disagreements, let us resolve them at the level of the school. Right? Let's try by all means. Should we reach a point where we are unable to resolve, then now it becomes a grievance. Right? So if we are unhappy, let's try and resolve before we even start any grievance committee. If push comes to shove, then we can create a grievance committee. Right? At the level of the school, the principal is a chairperson. Right? He needs to chair the grievance committee as he is in charge of QMS in the level of the school. Right? Where necessary, the principal may request a principal from a neighboring school to preside over the matter. Should the principal be unhappy, or should he be one way or another be involved in the grievance that has been brought forward, the principal may then ask another principal to preside over the matter. Now, one member of the SMT should form part of the committee, and one representative from each of the union that are admitted to a LRC and have members in the school. Right, so please do take note of that. Not that because unions exist in South Africa now, they need to be in that committee. If there are members in the school, then the representative in that committee. Right? A similar approach needs to take place at a second level. Right? The circuit manager, who is the chairperson, when necessary, also the circuit manager may request a circuit manager from a neighboring circuit to preside over the matter, one official from the district, and one representative from each of the unions that are admitted to ELRC. Probably in this particular case, it would be at the branch level or at the regional level. Now, what happens if there is now a grievance that needs to be? In case of any disagreement between the educator and the supervisor, all efforts should be made to resolve such disagreements at the school level. Effort should be made. Hence, I was explaining or making emphasis to this point that all efforts. We resolve everything before even having a grievance committee, including the intervention of the principal. If no resolution is found, the aggrieved party must refer the grievance to the principal within 3 days, 3 working days. Right? So if there is a case, the appraisee or the aggrieved person needs to report to the principal within 3 working days. Then the principal must establish a grievance committee within 5 working days after receipt of the grievance. The grievance committee must resolve the grievance within 10 working days after it has been established. Right? A similar approach needs to be observed at the second level as well. Should the aggrieved party be unhappy with the decision of the grievance committee at the school level, he must refer to the matter to the circuit manager in writing within the 5 working days. The circuit manager must establish a grievance committee in 5 working days after receipt of the grievance. Then the circuit grievance committee must resolve the grievance within 10 working days after establishing the committee. All right. Now, should an employee disagree with the decision of the circuit grievance committee, such an employee may invoke the dispute resolution procedure of the ELRC. Right? I think that is clear, colleagues. We all know what to do if we are unhappy. Let's try by all means to resolve the disagreement. Even before creating or establishing that grievance committee. If obviously we were unhappy, I'm not saying that must not happen. If you are unhappy, then report to the principal within the 3 working days. So the principal then starts the committee in 5 days, and then within 10 days everything needs to be resolved. And if we're unhappy, we follow the same process. We report to the second level of second office. Right? This is the grievance procedure flow chart. It's basically what I was explaining to you. Right? This is between the supervisor and the educator. If we agree on the scores or the process went quite well, then this is the arrows I follow. Right? Everything then right up until everything is sent to the district. But if I'm not happy, I'm unhappy. Right? If there are disagreements, right? The school grievance committee, then the matter needs to be discussed and be resolved. If I'm still not happy at school level, then I report and move on to the second level, right? And I follow these processes right up until I'm satisfied or all matters are resolved, right? So I will end there with grievance procedure and disagreements if we are not happy, and probably move on now to the next slide, which speak to the IQMS flow chart. Right, this one needs to happen. For example, Mr. Skosana spoke to us earlier on that QMS is already been implemented for post level 4, which are the principal. In our schools already, they have been working work plans and being signed and sent off. For us, level 1, QMS is being implemented in the following year, which is 2022 January. Now, this needs to take place or needs to unfold in the following year and needs to be followed by the principal of schools during QMS. Now, all educators in term 1, they all need to have access to the collective agreement. Now, I know that a collective agreement was sent as hard copy, and also a soft copy was made available via our chat groups. So already that part has been dealt with. So we need to make sure also advocacy and training needs to take place. Hence, some of us are in this platform and we are being trained for QMS. Roles and responsibilities need to be stipulated clearly during QMS. What needs to happen, who's doing what, starting from the principal right up to level 1. It needs to be made clear. I know Mr. Ngoma did touch on what are the responsibilities of the principal, what are the responsibilities of the senior management, what is the responsibilities really of the SMT as a whole, and what is the responsibility of all of us as appraisees, as well as being level 1 educators. So this needs to unfold in term 1, right? Principal and SMT need to and sign work plans with supervisors, right? I know with us level 1, it does not apply to us, but we will speak to it in session 2, what are work plans, but it really speaks to a principal as well as the managers. With level 1, we don't have to do or prepare work plans, so this is really not applicable to us. But remember that QMS is informed by the work plans that will be done by the managers in school. Right? Completion of section A of our appraisal instrument. Right? I did touch on that one, and I know Miss Somi really went thorough and went through that section A that need to be done by us when we are doing our self-appraisal. Right? We will be doing an informal self-appraisal in term 1. She really did a good job on that one. I'm sure we really understand what needs to happen. Right? Developing implementational plan, a schedule for lesson observation and appraisals and so forth. This needs to be prepared by the supervisors. Obviously, there is that time where we do a pre-discussion with our supervisors. So that needs to take place or unfold in term 1. Then in term 2, this is where the formal mid-year appraisal that takes place, where you need to do a self-appraisal, and then there is a pre-appraisal discussion. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because Ms. Nsomi did touch on it. Then there are lessons. Mr. Ngoma was talking about this when he was talking to the performance standard. During the lesson observation, performance standard 1 to 3 are really the focus in the classroom. Then during term 2, media appraisal is undertaken towards the end of the second term. Right? Remember, colleagues, the QMS is not supposed to disturb the functioning or the program of the school. Hence, everything on the plans and the role and responsibilities needs to be done during term 1. So at no point during the school year, the teaching and learning need to be disturbed, because now everybody is busy preparing documents or preparing for QMS. Everything needs to be done during term 1. You prepare and you plan during term 1. All right? So remember, term 2, I said this is where the formal appraisal needs to take place. And I know Ms. Nsomi did mention that this part where you keep all the documents, evidence, everything that needs to be signed and sent to the principal's office for verification, and then kept at the office during the term 2. Then in term 3, right, informal appraisal and lesson observation only. You may not need to keep these documents. Obviously, she did mention that it does not mean now that we don't do lesson observation. We need to do lesson observation, and this is where development takes place, right? So development needs to take place in term 2, sorry. Then in term 4, again, it's a similar cycle that takes place in term 2. So you do self-appraisal, pre-appraisal discussion, lesson observation, annual appraisal, post-appraisal discussion. Remember here we were saying that you need to discuss the scores. You agree, and then you sign the right, and then you finalize the composite score sheet, which I was speaking to. I showed you an example when we're talking to the instruments that you need to use, right? So you agree on the scores, you sign, and then you send your documents. The supervisor sends the document to the principal. Remember here, there is a summative score sheet that needs to be completed. So that needs to be sent to the principal and submitted. In the summative score sheet, we will see it in our second session. It shows every educator score sheet. It shows every educator's scores, including from level 1 up to level 4. Then this document is verified by the principal and sent to the district. All right, so that's what needs to take place during the following year, which is I was speaking to flow chart. Now I want to move on and speak to now the differences between QMS and IQMS. Right, we're making reference to IQMS as well as now when we are training you guys on QMS. Now let's see now what has changed, what is new, and what was used in IQMS. Right. On my left, I've got a column for QMS, and then on my right, I've got a column for IQMS. I would like to believe it is the same with you as well. Now, the key differences between QMS and IQMS. Number one, the QMS introduces a mid-year educator appraisal followed by an annual appraisal. With IQMS, educator appraisal in the IQMS are conducted annually. Right? It was done once. IQMS, it is done twice, like Ms. Msomi was saying. Number two, the QMS requires a member of the SMT to conduct performance appraisal of educators under his or her supervision, including lesson observation. Remember that in IQMS, we had what you call DSGs, Developmental Support Group, who were responsible for educator appraisal, lesson observations, and development in the IQMS. So remember, they were in charge. They were running IQMS in schools and everything when it was consolidated and sent to the principal for verification. Number three, resource person may be requested by the appraisee to serve as an observer. With IQMS, we had what you call a peer selected by the educator to serve as the DSG. Right? I also that currently level 1, level 2, and level 3, you are still on IQMS. Right? Remember, I saw a circular saying that by the 15th of December, IQMS needs to be completed and submitted to the district. So we are still doing IQMS. Right? Our principals are still doing, are currently doing QMS. Then number four, the process is driven by the principal and managed by the school management. Remember, we mentioned this earlier on that the principal is now in charge of QMS. Remember, in IQMS, staff development team with SDT was responsible for managing IQMS. Number 5, self-evaluation at least twice per year during the mid-year and annual appraisal. With IQMS, it was self-evaluation conducted at least once per year. A separate appraisal instrument for different post levels, right? The instrument that I showed you earlier on speaks to only post level 1. Later on, we will see a document, instrument that speaks to level 2, level 3, and level 4. And then you'll see the differences also with them. So do not use a instrument that does not speak to you as level 1. With IQMS, one appraisal instrument for all post level was used. Number 7, annual work plans with clear targets and goals for post level 2 and post level 4. We'll speak to work plans for post level 2 up to level 4 in the next session. So with post level 1, we don't do work plans, right? In IQMS, we did not have clear targets set for post levels, right? So we just had one instrument that speaks to that really everyone needed to fill in. But with QMS, its instrument is, the work plans have clear targets for post level 2 up to level 4, right? Number 8, rating scale for principal who teaches greater than or less than 30% of the scheduled teaching time, right? This speaks to principals that are teaching because obviously of PPN, and you have some schools that principals are not teaching because of PPN. As per document, PEM document, it says if a principal is busy, they may not be allocated a teaching load, right? So this one really speaks. So see now, QMS is clear on that. Principals that are teaching will be appraised upon that, and principals that are not teaching in a classroom, they also will be appraised with a certain document or with an instrument that speaks to that as well. In IQMS, differentiation in a principal's teaching schedule not considered during appraisal. Number 9, no personal growth plan to avoid duplication with CPTD systems. Now, with IQMS, there was or you had to complete a personal growth plan annually, right? So, colleagues, those are the differences now between QMS and IQMS. So now we know how easy and simple it is to work QMS. So when the year begins next year, 2022, it will be clear and we'll know what is expected. We'll know what has changed, what is new, and what is old. Right? In terms of performance standard, what is new and what is old with QMS? We've got our post level 1, 2, 3 to 4, and then here we've got our performance standards, and we are going to work in this direction. We have QMS and we have IQMS. Now with post level 1, with QMS, there are only 5 performance standards and 12 criteria. With IQMS, there were 7 performance standards and 27 criterions. Now with post level 2, our departmental heads, there are 6 performance standards and 16 criteria. With IQMS, there were 10 performance standards and 42 performance standards. With post level 3, our DPs, there are 7 performance standards and 13 criteria with QMS. In IQMS, there were 12 performance standards and 52 criteria. With our principals, there are 7 performance standards, same as the DPs, and 13 criteria, same as our DPs. With IQMS, there were 12 and 52 criteria. So now, in terms of administration, you can see, colleagues, that it has been minimized. less administration work that needs to be done for all of us actually. So QMS really we had quite a lot of administration that needed to be done. And now with IQMS, as we have been mentioning, that it really now each performance standard, it really speaks to each post level, right? So I need to be appraised as per my post level, or rather as per my job description in our PEM document, which is our contract, right? QMS management plan, what needs to unfold in a year, the following year, or rather what needs to take place, colleagues. Right, term 1, it is similar to the flow chart that I spoke to earlier on. Term 1, which is January to March, right? Advocacy needs to take place, and who are the people that are responsible for all these activities in term 1? Principal, SMT, educators, as well as the circuit manager. Remember that we said as much as the principal is in charge now of QMS, and SMT is in charge in managing or implementation of the QMS, but we all take a part in QMS, right? Remember, if you can see in responsibilities, educators are also a part of QMS, right? Right, colleagues, remember in the flowchart I mentioned all of this. Ensure that educators have access to a collective agreement. Role and responsibilities needs to be discussed. We need to know who's doing what, and then develop implementation plans. Schedules needs to be done, and then circuit managers need to verify and send everything to the district, right? April and June, remember now this is our formal appraisal that needs to take place, which is term 2. We're doing our self-appraisal by educators, which is us, those who will be appraised. Pre-appraisal discussion that needs to take place. Let us agree. It needs to be clear what is expected of me during the appraisal or during the lesson observation. I need to know what is expected of me. That is clearly defined in the instrument in page 1. It is clear, so let's make sure that we discuss this in pre-appraisal, right? Also, do remember that we need to discuss our contextual factors. For contextual factors, if there are any, let's talk about them. So during number 5, where we speak about post-appraisal, the scores, all of those things need to be considered, right? If you require a resource person, remember you need to notify the educator or the supervisor 3 days before the sitting of a lesson observation, or during or before the appraisal needs to take place, right? And then when we agree and we're happy, the principal need to verify and sign, right? Remember that you as an appraisee, you need to sign the appraisal instrument, also the score sheet you need to sign, and then send to the principal for verification, and everything need to be signed and sent to the district. A similar approach again needs to take place in term 3, right? Performance review, obviously, and then I do a self-appraisal. This is an informal appraisal, remember, colleagues. Then we need to do a lesson observation. Remember, we said here documents may not be right. This is mainly performance review of a formal appraisal that took place in term 2, right? In October and December, that is the annual appraisal, which is the second appraisal that needs to take place. A similar process now needs to take place. As we can see, there is appraisal by educator, self-appraisal by educator, pre-appraisal discussion, lesson observation, annual appraisal, and post-appraisal discussion. Discuss about our scores, and then we sign and we send to the principal for verification, and he also verifies and signs, and he compiles a summary score sheet and then sends to the circuit and district, right? And then we wait for our pay progression, our 1.5%. Right, colleagues, this is now the end of our session, our presentation for a first session. There will be a session 2 that will follow, but before our second session begins, I want to go through frequently asked questions, or perhaps you colleagues may have questions. There is a platform that is created in our channel. We've seen colleagues have been commenting, and I believe some were asking questions. So please do ask questions on that platform. We will respond to you at the end of second session. And again, colleagues, we want to stress this for those colleagues who are unable to connect. This session will be made available in YouTube. You can always log in, and at any time, if you want to refresher yourselves, just log in. It will be available in YouTube. It will stay there. So at any time, you are able to download, and you can use it offline. Right, colleagues, here are some of the questions that are mostly or at least frequently asked questions. Number 1, can an educator to be evaluated in terms of the QMS? No. The employer has every right to evaluate the performance of its employees, provided there is an agreement or there is an agreed process and instrument. Right? So, colleagues, we cannot deny our supervisors or the employer to evaluate our performance. I always want to make this example. Most of us colleagues, we've got helpers in our homes who really assist us in making our homes clean. You will always want to evaluate their performance, how they perform, how are they doing their work according to your instruction. So it's a similar process with us, that we are employed, we are bound to be evaluated in terms of our performance. So we cannot deny, we may not say no. So we will be evaluated, provided, right, there are agreements and instruments for all those processes to take place. Number 2, who is responsible to conduct the appraisal of an educator? The immediate supervisor of an post-level 1 educator. That is his or her departmental head. In the absence of the deputy principal or the principal can conduct the appraisal. Similarly, the deputy principal or principal appraises a departmental head, while a deputy principal is appraised by the principal. Then the second, as the immediate supervisor of the principal, is responsible for his or her appraisal. Which appraisals are compulsory? Mid-year and annual appraisals are compulsory for all educators in a school. That is level 1 up until level 4. It is compulsory for mid-year and annual appraisal, which is in term 2 and in term 4. Number 4, is necessary to engage in self-appraisal prior to mid-year and annual appraisal. It is very much so important that this takes place. It is very necessary. Again, when we made, in fact, I made an emphasis on term 3, that this is where there's a performance review on how we were doing. This is where development takes place. So it is very important to do your self-appraisal prior the mid-year as well as the annual appraisal. Number 5. Where are mid-year and annual scores recorded? Both the scores are recorded on the same appraisal instrument for the current appraisal cycle. Number 6, which documents are submitted to district office? The composite score sheet is completed and signed by each educator and his or her supervisor after the annual appraisal. These individual score sheets are attached to Annexure E, which we will speak to in the next session. That is the score sheet for the school and submitted to the district office. Should the appraisal document be filled? That is number 7. So should be filed. Sorry. Yes, the school should file the documents for a period of 5 years. Number 8, is necessary for the appraiser or immediate supervisor to write the last presenter in this session and allow Mr. Kosana, who was the person to open this session for us, to probably to come and close this session. Thank you, colleagues.
Where we'll get the complete presentation, and Mr. Msomu will be coming back to wrap up with the second session.